One of the most haunted prisons in America, Eastern State Penitentiary, stands as a towering relic of a bygone era, its crumbling walls and desolate cell blocks whispering tales of torment and despair. The air within is heavy with a palpable sense of dread, and those who dare to enter often find themselves at the mercy of the malevolent spirits said to still roam its abandoned corridors. Located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Eastern State Penitentiary is infamous for its spine-chilling reputation. Established in 1829, it was designed to inspire penitence or true regret in the hearts of its inmates. Its revolutionary radial design and strict solitary confinement policy were meant to reform criminals, but instead it bred madness and despair. Over the years, countless stories of ghostly apparitions, disembodied laughter, and unexplained footsteps have emerged, solidifying its place as one of the most haunted sites in America. The legend that haunts my dreams, though, is not just another ghost story. It's the account of a locksmith named Gary Johnson, whose encounter with a shadow figure within the prison's decaying walls left him forever changed. His story is a chilling testament to the otherworldly horrors that lurk in the dark corners of Eastern State Penitentiary. It was a cold, dreary day when Gary Johnson arrived at Eastern State Penitentiary. The sky hung low with dark, foreboding clouds, casting an oppressive gloom over the ancient structure. As a seasoned locksmith, Gary had been hired to repair some of the prison's antique locks, a job he had accepted with a mix of excitement and trepidation. He had heard the stories, of course, the whispered tales of spectral sightings and eerie encounters that had plagued the penitentiary for decades. But Gary was a man of logic and reason, not one to be swayed by ghost stories. As he walked through the crumbling entrance and into the penitentiary's vast echoing halls, a sense of unease settled over him. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and decay, and the oppressive silence seemed almost unnatural. The prison's cold, desolate corridors stretched out before him like the skeletal remains of some ancient, malevolent beast. Gary made his way to cell block 4, where he had been instructed to begin his work. The narrow, claustrophobic passage was lined with rusted iron bars and crumbling plaster walls. Shadows danced in the dim light, and the air was heavy with an almost tangible sense of dread. As he approached the cell he was to work on, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He shook off the unease and set to work, his hands moving deftly over the old, rusted lock. As he worked, the oppressive silence was suddenly shattered by a low, eerie whisper that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. Gary froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He listened intently, but the whispering had stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Trying to ignore the growing sense of dread, Gary continued with his task. The minutes ticked by, each one dragging on like an eternity. Then, without warning, the air grew cold, unnaturally cold. Gary could see his breath misting in the air before him. He glanced around nervously, his eyes straining to pierce the thick shadows that filled the cell block. That's when he saw it, a dark, shadowy figure moving slowly along the corridor. At first he thought it was just a trick of the light, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was no illusion. The shadow seemed to pulse and shift, its form constantly changing and morphing as it moved. It exuded an aura of malevolence that sent a chill down Gary's spine. Gary wanted to run, to flee from the prison and never look back, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. He watched in horror as the shadowy figure approached. Its eyes, or what he assumed were its eyes, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. The figure stopped a few feet away from him, and Gary could feel its gaze boring into him, as if it were peering into his very soul. Suddenly the shadow leapt forward, moving with a speed and agility that seemed impossible. Gary stumbled backward, his heart racing as he watched the figure disappear into the darkness of the cell. He could hear a low, guttural growl emanating from the shadows, and for a moment he thought he could see faces, twisted, tormented faces appearing on the walls around him. Desperation took hold of him, and he scrambled to his feet, his tools forgotten on the cold stone floor. He ran through the cell block, his footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The shadows seemed to reach out for him, and he could feel the cold, clammy touch of unseen hands brushing against his skin. His breath came in ragged gasps as he fled, the sense of being watched growing stronger with every step. Finally, he burst out into the open air, the oppressive weight of the prison lifting slightly as he emerged into the daylight. He collapsed to the ground, his body trembling with fear and exhaustion. He could still feel the eyes of the shadowy figure upon him, its malevolent presence lingering like a dark cloud over his soul. Gary never returned to Eastern State Penitentiary. The experience had shaken him to his core, leaving him haunted by nightmares and plagued by a lingering sense of dread. He spoke of his encounter only once to a close friend, before swearing never to speak of it again. But the story spread, adding to the prison's dark and terrifying legend. To this day, the shadowy figure remains a mystery, its origins and intentions unknown. Some say it is the spirit of a tormented inmate, driven mad by the prison's harsh conditions. Others believe it is a manifestation of the collective suffering and despair that permeates the very walls of Eastern State Penitentiary. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. The shadow figure is a chilling reminder of the darkness that still lingers within the prison's decaying halls. The tale of the locksmith's encounter is but one of many that have emerged from Eastern State Penitentiary, each one more terrifying than the last. The prison's reputation as a hotspot for paranormal activity continues to draw thrill-seekers and ghost hunters from around the world, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the otherworldly entities that roam its dark corridors. But for those who have experienced the true horrors of Eastern State Penitentiary, the prison is not just a place of curiosity and intrigue. It is a place of fear and torment, where the line between the living and the dead is blurred, and where the shadows hold secrets that are better left undiscovered. As the years passed, Gary's story became legend, but Eastern State Penitentiary continued to add to its collection of eerie tales. Visitors reported hearing disembodied laughter echoing through the halls, and the sound of phantom footsteps following them as they explored the decaying cell blocks. Some even claimed to have seen ghostly figures flitting through the shadows, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. One of the most notorious hotspots for paranormal activity within the prison is Cell Block 12. Known for its echoing voices and shadowy apparitions, it has become a focal point for ghost hunters and paranormal investigators. Many who venture into Cell Block 12 describe a feeling of intense unease, as if they are being watched by unseen eyes. Some have even reported being touched or pushed by invisible hands, their terror captured on grainy night vision footage. Then there is the infamous death row, where the most hardened criminals were housed in their final days. The atmosphere here is thick with a sense of dread, and many have claimed to hear the anguished cries of condemned souls echoing through the empty cells. The cold, unfeeling walls seem to absorb the despair and suffering of those who spent their last days confined within them, and visitors often describe an overwhelming feeling of sadness and oppression. Perhaps the most disturbing area of all is the solitary confinement cells, where inmates were subjected to complete isolation for months or even years on end. The psychological torment endured by these prisoners has left a dark, indelible mark on the very fabric of the prison. Visitors who brave these cells often report feeling an overwhelming sense of despair and hopelessness, as if the walls themselves are closing in on them. Some have even claimed to see ghostly figures pacing back and forth in their tiny confines, forever trapped in their own personal hell. One particularly harrowing account comes from a former guard who worked at the prison in the 1940s. He described an encounter with a spectral figure in one of the solitary cells, a figure that seemed to be shrouded in darkness. The guard was so terrified by the experience that he resigned from his position the very next day, unable to shake the feeling of dread that had taken hold of him. These stories, while terrifying, are just a small part of the tapestry of horror that makes up Eastern State Penitentiary's haunted history. Each new tale adds to the prison's reputation, drawing more curious souls to its darkened halls. Yet for all the thrill-seekers and ghost hunters who flock to Eastern State, there are those who believe that the true horrors of the prison are far more profound than any ghostly apparition. Many paranormal experts theorize that the intense emotional energy left behind by the inmates has created a kind of psychic residue, a lingering imprint of their suffering and despair. This energy, they suggest, is what gives rise to the paranormal activity within the prison. The walls themselves seem to hold the memories of the past, replaying the torments of the inmates over and over again, like a twisted, never-ending loop. This theory is supported by the numerous accounts of visitors experiencing sudden, inexplicable feelings of sadness, anger, or fear while exploring the prison. Some have even reported feeling physically ill, their bodies reacting to the oppressive atmosphere in a way that defies logical explanation. It is as if the very essence of the prison has seeped into their souls, leaving them forever changed. Despite the countless reports of paranormal activity, there are those who remain skeptical, dismissing the stories as mere folklore or the result of overactive imaginations. Yet, even the most hardened skeptics often find themselves unnerved by the sheer weight of the prison's dark history. It's difficult to walk through the crumbling corridors of Eastern State Penitentiary and not feel the presence of something otherworldly, something that defies rational explanation. As the legend of Gary Johnson's encounter with the shadow figure continues to grow, so too does the mystery of Eastern State Penitentiary. The prison stands as a testament to the darker side of human nature, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead are blurred and where the past refuses to remain buried. For those who dare to venture into its haunted halls, Eastern State Penitentiary offers a glimpse into a world where the shadows hold secrets too terrifying to comprehend. It is a place that challenges our understanding of reality, forcing us to confront the possibility that there are forces at work beyond our comprehension. So the next time you find yourself in Philadelphia, consider paying a visit to Eastern State Penitentiary, but be warned. Once you step through its crumbling gates, you may find that the shadows have a way of following you home. If you have your own ghost story or paranormal encounter to share, leave your story in the comments below and subscribe for more terrifying tales from haunted places around the world.